Welcome to Cepher Commentaries. Today we discuss Bere'shiyth, Genesis, chapter 18. And Yahweh Excuse me just a moment. Okay. And today we continue with Genesis chapter 18. And Yahweh appeared to him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. Now the plains of Mamre are a very good question as to where these might be located. This location of where Abram is journeying is going to be quite interesting in terms of our discussion later on, because these plains of Mamre appear to be a fairly wide plain, and they do have some historic evidence that they may be located in an area that would, in the ancient times, be considered Ethiopia. In other words, somewhere in the Upper Nile region, quite a ways up in the Upper Nile, but a place where he would arrive at a plain. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. Now, here we see the 3 men. This Hebrew term here is Enoshim, which would be, the plural form of Ish, Enoshim. So it is 3 men. And said, My Adonai, if now I have found favor in your sight, pass not away, I pray, from your servant. Let a little water, I pray, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will fetch a morsel of bread, and comfort you, your hearts. And after that you shall pass on, for therefore are you come to your servant. And they said, So do as you have said. And Abraham hastened into the tent to El Sarah, and said, Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. So here you see the identification of Sarah as El Sarah. We know that once Abraham has increased his name by adding the he, and Sarai has increased her name by adding the he, an indication that the Ruach HaKodesh was indwelling in both of them. Now the intent and the purposes of Sarai are now completely contained in El, or in Elohim, such that she is now marked as El Sarah. And this is the El Sarah is not something that we made up, but rather this is something that is placed in the Hebrew text, connecting the Aleph Lamed with the F is what you might think of as a upper hyphen. So you have an underscore, and then you have a hyphen, and then you have a makef. And so one is right at the ground level, one is mid-range, and one is upper. And the makef links a word the same way a hyphen does. And a hyphen, when it links a word, it creates the idea of a singular concept in the binding of 2 words together. And so if you said, I'm going to understand this in a split second, the split second might be hyphenated. And if it's hyphenated, it becomes a single idea. It becomes instructive in that the proper noun includes, if you will, an adjective or an adjective modifying the proper noun, but may also be another proper noun joined together by this makef, which then construes the proper noun and either or of the proper nouns as adjectives reflecting of one another into a singular concept, El Sarah. So think of the makef as something that is capable of transiting a proper noun into an adjective on either side of the makef. So Sarah is going to modify El in terms of who is El, and El is going to modify Sarah in terms of who is Sarah to give us this particular and distinct entity, El Sarah. And Abraham ran to the herd and fetched a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, and he hastened to dress it. Well, now when you're talking about this, so you have three people arrive, and you and Sarai, and maybe your group, your herdsmen are there, your cattle are there, your sheep are there, and so all of a sudden, three men come into your. We see is three in 18:2. He looked at three men, yeah, and so what we see here is we see in the Ivrit. I want to look here just a minute at the Ivrit. Yeah, so we see, Shelosha, Enoshim. So the Sheloshi is oftentimes third, Shelosh or Shelosha is three. So it is, the Hebrew does say and does specify three men. Okay. So when we see this, here comes three men. Now he says, okay, well, El Sarah, quickly knead up some bread, take some meal and knead it, maybe put some yeast in it, and let's see if we can get it to rise here a little bit, and so that you can make some cakes upon the hearth. And then he gets a calf. So you're talking about something that is less than 2 years old. He gets a calf and he gives it to a young man and says, quickly butcher this. Really? Quickly butcher a calf? How long is that going to take in butchering a calf before the calf can be presented and then be also, cooked? So we're talking about here, this is going to be a full morning of accompaniment. It's going to be, it says that they arrived in the heat of the day. Well, the heat of the day is going to be something other than morning. So they're after, it's maybe 10 o'clock, maybe noon, maybe 1. Either way, they're going to take some time to prepare this meal. And Abraham took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. In other words, Abraham's not partaking, but the three are. And they said to him, where is Sarah, your woman? And he said, behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah, your woman, shall have a son. And Sarah heard at the tent door, which was behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, well stricken in age, and it ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Well, this can be understood. This is a very eloquent way of putting that Sarah was postmenopausal. In other words, the entire were exhausted and did not exist anymore, and she was well beyond it because she is old, well stricken in age. And so Sarah has known this for decades now. And so verse 12 says, therefore, Sarah laughed within herself, saying, am I waxed old? After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Adonai, being old also? And Yahweh said to Abraham, wherefore did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I of a surety bear a child which am old? Okay, now here in verse 13, you can see that one of the three that have appeared before Abraham, which Abraham immediately perceived, was Yahweh himself appearing before Abraham. And then Yahweh talking to Abraham says, is anything too hard for Yahweh? At the time appointed, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Then Sarah denied it, saying, I laughed not, for she was afraid. And he said, nay, but you did laugh. And you might recall when this news was first delivered to Abraham, he also heard. Now, one thing I want to point out here, while you're contemplating this issue of this miraculous pregnancy, bear in mind that Abraham is not suffering from impotence or infertility. He is not suffering from infertility because after Sarah passes away, he marries Keturah and has 6 more sons. So this gives you an idea that, well, it could be that Abraham here is a dry tree at this point, who's going to be miraculously rejuvenated by Yah. And I think there may be scriptural support. The fat be impregnated when she is completely devoid of any ability to create an embryo is going to be one of the miracles that is so spectacular about all of this, bearing in mind that Ishmael is already living and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And Yahweh said, shall I hide from Abraham the thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. And I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall guard the way that Yahweh may bring upon Abram at that which he had spoken of him. Now, here we can see, when we talk about the way of Yahweh, we have a couple of verses that are going to substantiate this idea of what is the way. Because remember that Yahushua said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. So we might ask ourselves the question, well, what is this way that you are? What is this truth that you are? And what is this life that you are? These are large questions, and we can see here that the way is identified in Genesis, Bere'shiyth, chapter 18, verse 19. And it says, I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, that they shall guard the way of Yahweh. Then the way of Yahweh is given here, to do justice and judgment. Now we see this also in Micah 6:8, which is a very good phrase and worthy of remembering. He has shown thee, O man, what is good, and what does Yahweh require of thee, but to justly and to walk humbly with Yahweh. So we can see that justice is mercy. Okay, so here's how we kind of look at justice compared to mercy. Justice is getting exactly what you deserve. And judgment is that point where either mercy or justice is going to be applied to you, dependent upon what your deeds have been. And you can see that the children of Abraham are called to justice and to judgment. And as it says in Micah 6:8, to love mercy. In fact, you might recall that the passage that Mashiach quotes twice, haven't you read, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, quoting the Old Testament, of course. All right. Verse 20, and Yahweh said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which comes to me. And if not, I will know. In other words, the land is crying out for justice and judgment. And Yah is hearing this, and now he's going to go there for himself, to see for himself if this cry is false or not. And the basis from there, and went towards Sodom. But Abraham stood yet before Yahweh. And Abram drew near and said, will you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Remembering that Lot and his family were there. Perchance there be 50 righteous within the city. Will you also destroy and not spare the place? Be far from you to do after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth act rightly? Okay, so here we have Abraham trying to call Yah into a slower judgment. In other words, no collective punishment of all. collective punishment to the people of Sodom, especially if there's 50 righteous. And Abraham is saying, if there's 50 righteous there, well, maybe you should spare the whole place, because maybe there's a chance that the 50 righteous will turn the hearts of the sinners. And Yahweh said, knowing exactly how many righteous there were in the city, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And Abraham answered and said, upon me to speak to, there shall lack 5 of the 50 righteous. Find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, perchance there shall be 40 found there. And he said, I will not do it for 40's sake. And he said to him, oh, let not Adonai be angry, and I will speak. Perchance there shall be 30 found there. Now, when you think about Abraham, he's arguing and begging on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. Don't destroy the place. There might be some righteous there. And of course, knowing in his own mind that Lot is there, and he is thinking that Lot is held out in righteousness, and that Lot may have a large family, and he may have many friends that are also in his circle that are righteous. And verse 31, and he said, behold, now I have taken upon me to speak to Yahweh. Perchance there shall be 20 found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. And he said, oh, let not Adonai be angry, and I will speak yet but this once more. Perchance 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. And Yahweh went his way as soon as he had left communion with Abraham, and Abraham returned. Okay, so this is quite fascinating that you see Abraham starting out with the call to reluctance on the part of Yahweh to destroy all of Sodom and Gomorrah, because, of course, Abraham knew of their sin and their iniquity and how grievous and how great it was. And he is trying to call back Yah from destroying it. But ultimately, Abraham knows that he is pleading for the life of Lot and his family, and really no one more. And he can't, in his own mind, be convinced that there are even 10 righteous in Sodom. He's hoping that there might be 10 righteous, but he doesn't think so. Okay. All right. So let's continue in chapter 19. 2 messengers to Sodom at even. You recall, there were 3 that came to Abraham. Yahweh remained behind to talk with Abraham, while 2 messengers went on to Sodom. And Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And again, he could recognize who they were. And he said, behold now, my Adonai, turn in, I pray, unto your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and you shall rise up early, and go on your way. So we can see that wherever Abraham was, the plains of Mamre must have been in proximity to Sodom, because they were able to have the lunch and then go on in the afternoon, or go on and to arrive at Sodom at evening. Now, maybe not. Maybe it's possible that they were not in proximity, but that they were able to somehow transport themselves at a higher rate of speed. But that's not what the narrative infers. The narrative infers that they were within walking distance of Sodom at even. And again, we recall that when Abraham and Lot were overburdening the area, Abraham said, you pick and you choose which land will be for you, and I will take the other. And so you get first choice, and I'll take what's left. And Lot, of course, picked the really nice stuff, the green pastures and all that. So there you go, Abraham, you can have that. And Abraham went his way. But Lot ended up in the area of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, when we talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, the book of Jasher is very illustrative about what was going on in Sodom. And we can see a model of today's world in the governing of Sodom, because what you saw in Sodom at least according to the book of Jasher, is this completely corrupted judiciary, a completely exploitive system, a self-eating system, if you will, a consuming system, that when strangers came in, they would fleece the stranger and they would take as much as they could illegally from the stranger. And at one point, when our main character is trying to leave Sodom, his host throws a rock at him and hits him in the head and then tells him, "You owe me money." And he says, "Why do I owe you money?" "Because I bestowed the blessing on you by hitting you in the head with a stone." And so they go to court, and our man is pleading with the judge. "That can't possibly be right, that you have a law here that says if he hits me in the head with a stone, I owe him money." And the judge says, "Oh, yeah, that's our law here. That is, in fact, what the case is." And so at that point, our protagonist picks up a stone, hits the judge in the head with it. "Now you can collect from him. You can collect what you owe me from him," and then left. But the whole point of the story and the whole moral of the story is that it wasn't just the egregious sexual defilement that was present in Sodom and the 5 accompanying cities that was so bad. It was the whole of the culture was rotten and corrupted and backwards and unjust, and there was not a speck of righteousness in it. And so when you look at this idea of Abraham, trying to persuade Yah to have mercy on him for 50 righteous people, this could also be kind of understood as 50 righteous ideas, right? 50 righteous ideas, right? And because when he says that, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the place, right? Because he says, perchance you will find 50 righteous that are in the city. Well, does it say 50 righteous men? No. Could he be talking about 50 righteous acts? 50. And when we talk about what is righteousness, when you think about it, what is righteous, right? And because when you talk about this word righteous, let's see if we can find what's being used in 1826 and see how that word is. I'm pretty sure that you're going to be talking about tzedakah. Just a minute, let me see if I can get there. But when you see this word righteous, what does righteous mean? Well, righteous comes from the word right, and it means to be what? Correct. It means to be correct. Okay. Yes, tzaddik. And tzaddik is the root word anyway. And in the text in 1826, the word that actually appears there is, let me see if I can find it here. Yeah. Oh, yeah, just tzaddik. No, tzaddikim, the righteous. So how is tzaddik defined? Just, lawful, righteous, right? It comes from the root tzadak, which means to be right in a moral and forensic sense, to be clean, to be clear, to do justice. Now, so we talked a little bit about this last week, about the idea of cleanliness and perfection, and the idea of what does it mean to be clean. Well, part of what it means to be clean is to be not burdened by injustice. So when you see an injustice taking place, you as a person who's called to justice and judgment cannot be a part of the injustice, because if you are, then you become unjust in your own deeds. And if you remain silent as to injustice, you become a co-conspirator with that which is unjust, and you are burdened. And because you are burdened with the injustice, you are unclean. What does it mean to be clean? Yah says, I will not make you clean who deny my name. What does it mean to be clean? It means to be just and to be not burdened with iniquity. And what's iniquity, right? It is the opposite of equity, it is inequity, it is unevenness, it is unfairness, it is injustice, it is out of balance. And so you have to be very careful, because if you are being silent as to injustice, then you are a co-conspirator with that injustice. So you can see, so when Abraham is calling out to Yah saying, are there 50 people? Are there 50 people in Sodom? Well, it's not just 50. He's saying 50 righteous. Are there 50 righteous? What would that mean? Well, that would mean 50 tzaddik, 50 who were not co-conspirators with the injustice that was Sodom. You see? Or 40 who were not co-conspirators with the injustice that was Sodom. Now, I don't know how this is possible, because when you have a culture that is that polluted and is that corrupted, who among the people there can call it out and say, this is a corrupt society, it's unjust, and the deeds of this judge are corrupt, and the people that he has harmed are manifest acts of injustice, and I cannot be a part of those. Well, I mean, that's one way of doing it, but I mean, somehow there has to be a reconciliation in your own mind that you are not burdened with the injustices of a corrupt society. Because if you are, then you are not tzaddik, you are in fact unclean. And if you're unclean, then you are not perfect, because again, in order to be perfect, you have to be clear water, unblemished water, tamaim. Right? You shall be water. You should be clear water, tamaim. And when we talk about clean, we're talking about kodesh, right? Kodesh. And so this idea of kodesh, again, calls you to justice and judgment, to look at the situation and say, okay, is this manifestly fair? Is this just? Is this a decision made that is not a respecter of persons? Does this comport with the Eben Rosh Pina, the stone of offense, the stone of stumbling, which are the 10 Devarim? Does this decision comport with the 10 Devarim? Or is it unjust and unfair and out of balance and iniquitous? And if it is iniquitous and you remain silent, you become a co-conspirator with the iniquity. And as a result, you are no longer clean, because you are no longer tzaddik or tzaddikim. Okay. All right, so let's continue here on chapter 19, and let's see where we are. Okay, and Lot pressed upon them greatly. Then they turned into him and entered his house, and he made them a feast, ate. So here we see that the time of year is kind of keen. If they were cooking matzah, this must have been sometime between Passover and first fruits. Okay, I'd be Passover and Shavuot, right? Okay, so but before they laid down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house around, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called to Lot and said to him, where are the men which came into you this night? Bring them out to us, so that we may know them. And Lot went out to the door to them and shut the door after him. And he said, I pray, brethren, do not do so wickedly. Now, when you think about this, hey, bring these guys out here so we can get to know them. You know, who are you? What are you doing here? What's going on? Now, even though this has been inferred that this was construed as the desire for the townspeople to engage in a sexual rape of these men, that's the inference. But I think you could also infer from this passage that anything, any interface between the townspeople of Sodom and these two men is going to be wickedness. Whether it be, this may be also another possibility that, the tires and the hubcaps off their car, and we're going to, on and on and on, that this may be the idea of taking everything they own from these two men and then even killing them. And for all we know, they could be even cannibals at this point. We don't know. But we know that Lot knows that the people in the town have a predisposition, like a hungry pack of wolves, if you will. You bring in, a bag of dog food, and the whole wolf pack is at the front door saying, "Bring the dog food out here, okay? Bring it out here." And so Lot says, "No, I pray, brethren, that you do not do so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters, and basically, I've got two virgin daughters. Let me, I pray, bring them out to you, and you can do to them as is good in your eyes. Only to these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof." Well, this is an extraordinary deed on the part of Lot. I mean, how can you construe this as an act of righteousness? Here, let me sacrifice my two virgin daughters to you in order to support these two angels. And these two angels, of course, have the capability of completely destroying the town. So what is Lot doing here? Well, this act of iniquity on the part of Lot is ultimately going to be something that is going to come down for generations and generations, as these same two daughters, who I don't know if they were touched or not, we're going to find out if they were touched or not, but these same two daughters are going to eventually engage in incestuous relationships with Lot and have children by him, who would become the Ammonites and the Moabites. And this is quite an interesting facet, because the Ammonites, neither the Ammonites nor the Moabites are blessed people. They're, in fact, cursed people. Okay. All right. Stand back. Okay. So, and verse 9, and they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came into sojourn, and he will need to be a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. And they pressed sorely upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break down the door. Okay. So they're going to, they're saying, okay, this fellow came into sojourn here, which is a big mistake to walk into Sodom to sojourn. And now let him judge, because we're going to do worse to you than we were going to do to him. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves even to find the door. Okay, so you can see that these two men that are in with Lot have the capability of doing whatever they need to do. And the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here, your son-in-law, your sons and your daughters, or whatever have you in the city? Bring them out of this place. Okay, so the men are inquiring, are there 10 of you? For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of Yahweh, and Yahweh has sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, which married his daughters. Now, wait a minute. I thought you said his daughters were virgins. And said, up and get out of this place, for Yahweh will destroy this city. But he seemed like the one who mocked his sons-in-law. In other words, oh, you're crying wolf. Yeah, it's going to destroy this place. How many times have we heard that? These guys have been getting away with sin for years, do what they want. There's just nothing but injustice. It's corrupt judges. They're all predators. They're all thieves. They're all exploiters. And they get away with it over and over and over again. So what are you talking about that Yah is going to judge this place? He hasn't judged it yet. And look at how well they're doing. And when the morning arose, then the messengers hastened Lot, saying, arise, take your woman and your two daughters, which are here, lest you be consumed in the iniquity of the city. Okay, so Lot had other daughters, and who were married to other men. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his woman and upon the hand of his two daughters, and Yahweh being merciful to him, and brought them forth and set them outside the city. Now, how did this happen? Was this, I'm going to set you outside of the city, let's go, we're going to walk through this crowd of blind men, come on, follow me? Or was it a miraculous transportation out of the city and out at a distance? And when it happened that when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, escape for your life, look not behind you, neither stay in all of the circle of the Yarden, but escape to the mountain, lest you be consumed. Get out of here. Head in that direction, don't look back. And Lot said to them, oh, not so, my sovereign. Behold, now your servant has found grace in your sight, and you have magnified your mercy, which you have shown to me in saving my life. I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. I need to go back into town. I mean, look, we got a dishwasher there. We got washer and dryer. We got all our stuff. We got a refrigerator full of food. I need to be back. I can't go out here. I don't have any food. I don't even have a knife. I mean, how am I supposed to do this? Behold, now this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. Let me escape to there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said to him, see, I have accepted you concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for which you have spoken. Make haste and escape from there, for I cannot do anything until you come from there. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. Now, this is going to be another interesting idea, because when you look at this word Zoar, hold on here just a minute. Let me look at this. This is in 19 verse 22. Let's take a look at this for just this word Zoar. Again, is going to give us some kind of proximal idea of where we are, right? Because obviously Lot has been taken out of the city of Sodom, and he's standing out there, and they're close enough to be able to see what's going on. And then he says, oh, by the way, don't look back, and I will let you go to this other little city called Zoar. Okay. So, and of course, Strong says it's a place east of the Jordan, which is, maybe. Okay, so Zoar. Now, what takes place here? The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Okay, so they made this move just before dawn. Then Yahweh rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from Yahweh out of the heavens. And he overthrew those cities and all of the circle and all of the inhabitants of the cities which grew upon the ground. But his woman, Lot's woman, looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before Yahweh. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the circle, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it happened that when Elohim destroyed the cities of the circle of the Yarden, that Elohim remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. And Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountain, and his 2 daughters with him. For he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave, he and his 2 daughters. Now, it's interesting. He begged the 2 men that had come to visit to let him go into Zoar. I don't want to be in the mountains. I want to live over there in another city and do the urban stuff, not do this rural stuff. And after he gets to Zoar, he's afraid to be there. Why? Because he was the only one that escaped the destruction of Sodom, and the people of Zoar knew that. So he feared to dwell in Zoar, and so he did what the 2 men had told him to do initially, to go up into the mountains, to dwell in a cave, he and his 2 daughters, because his wife had been turned to salt. And the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man in the earth to come in unto us in the manner of all the earth. Well, I don't know about that. Get out of the cave. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him that we may preserve seed of our father. Now, again, here we have this idea of some kind of promiscuity brought about with the idea of drinking wine. You remember the last time we saw this happen was Noah drinking wine, and from this comes some kind of iniquity that causes Canaan to be cursed. And they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. And it happened on the following day that the firstborn said to the younger, behold, I lay yesternight with my father. Let us make him drink wine this night also, and go in and lie with him, that we may preserve seed of our father. And they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he perceived not when she lay down, nor when she arose. Thus were both the daughters of Lot with child by their father, and the firstborn bore a son and named him Moab. The same is the father of the Moabim to this day. And the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. The same is the father of the children of Ammon to this day. Now, this is also a very interesting circumstance. And of course, we see that the idea of this taking place, the guilt of this transaction, this incestuous transaction, is blamed upon the virgin daughters, the daughters whom Lot had cast out to confront the whole of the town of Sodom as a ransom, if you will, to keep the Sodomites from destroying or exploiting the two men that had come. Even though it was possible for the two men that had come to blind the whole of the city, which apparently they had done, such that they could not find the door. And so you see the kind of iniquitous ideas that are going on here. But in this passage, the blame is placed clearly on the daughters and not on Lot. Now, when you look at the name of Moab, okay, so Moab, let's take a look at that for just a minute. And in some places it's called Moab, but this is from a prolonged form of the prepositional prefix mem and H1, which is Av. And so literally Moab means from the father. And so you have the, from and Av, right? Av. So you have this idea of Moab from the father, that's what it means, from the father. And then you see the Ben-Ami, and Ben-Ami is, Ami again is the word of the possessive form of the word Am. So you see the people are called Am. And the pronominal suffix yod is an indication of my. So Am means a people, as in a congregated unit, specifically a tribe of Yasharel, and Ami means my people. So when you see Ben-Ami, the son of my people. So what is being said here, I think what the daughters are trying to say, is that our tribe to be preserved, the tribe of Lot, who, remember, Lot was the son of Abraham's brother. He was not Abrahamic. Lot was the son of Abraham's brother. Okay? Important distinction, because the children of Moab and the children of Ben-Ami, the Ammonim, cannot be construed as the children of Abraham. They are distinct. They are not the children of Abraham. They are not Abrahamic people. And we're going to see this also. You're going to see this later on with the children of Nachor. Nachor, the brother of Abraham, who, when we talked about this before, when we were dealing with this in Bere'shiyth, that Nachor had 12 sons before Abraham had one. And Nachor's 12 sons, 8 from his wife and 4 from his concubine. One of those, the last one born, would be called Makkah. And this house of Makkah, I think, later emerges as the Maccabees in that time period between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and begin to establish an empire called the Hasmonean Empire, predicated around their ideas of what was contained in the writings in the Tanakh. And so, again, you can see that this group is not Abrahamic. They are the children of Nachor. They are not the children of Abraham. Very distinct. When you compare that to the children of Abraham, one is of course, Yishmael. And remember that Yishmael, his mother, Hagar, the stranger, was from Mitzrayim. So the Ishmaelim are half Hebrew, half Mitzrayim. So you can expect to see those 12 tribes around the river of Mitzrayim, and not necessarily in Arabia or anywhere else. When we talk about the tribes that are coming there, now we can also see that then when you get to Yitzhak, we have a very strong push on the lineage here in terms of what's happening in Scripture. The Scripture, particularly in the book of Genesis, is going to give us these genetic lines with specificity, the genealogy, showing us that the line of Yitzhak is going to be a direct line all the way to Mashiach. And we're going to see that the line of Esau is also going to be delineated, although in Genesis we'll get a whole roster of these dukes, as it's put in the KJV, the dukes. In the Cepher, we call them the Alephs, because that's the word that is used, the Alephim, the Aleph, the chief, the head honcho, the alpha man, the Aleph. And all of these sons of Esau are listed out to the third generation as Alephs, chiefs. And why would this be the case? Well, it's very interesting that we would see children of Abraham, namely Yishmaelim, who are not really identified as being in the region at the time of Mashiach. But there is a group that approaches Mashiach and says, well, we are children of Abraham. And Mashiach says to them, your father is the devil. And they say, our father was Abraham, and we have never been in bondage to any man. Now, this quote is very, very important because they're telling the Messiah, look, we are children of Abraham, but we are not of the house of Yasharel, because Yasharel was in captivity in Mitzrayim. We have never been in bondage. So what are they saying? That they are the children of Esau. They are the children of Esau. And remember, Esau is Edom. And Mashiach, it is written, was crucified in Sodom and Egypt. Now, I want you to think about this too. When you think about the name Sodom itself, Sodom is a form. It's actually, when you read Sodom in the text, it's actually, we have it written out as Sodom. Okay. And Sodom is a very interesting, proposition, a very interesting word. And in the Sodom, you can see that we have this idea of Edom being captured in the word. So I want to see if I can get the spelling for you too here, so I can find it. Let me bring it up here just a moment. And here we go. So Sodom, the Masoretic take on it is that it gives us this idea of Samek Dalet Mem. Now, you might recall that Dalet Mem is the word dam, blood. And typically the Samek is not a prefix that is used generally in the Ivrit, although we can see two letters in particular that appear in the Ivrit Aleph Beit that are secular in nature. One is the Samek, and the other is the Tet, because we know that we can, if you have a shin can have the dot at the beginning of the shin, or it could have it at the end. So if the dot is at the beginning, at the right-hand side of the shin, it is sh. But if it's at the left-hand side, it's sa. So seen, not sheen. All right, so then we have the letter S already in the Ivrit alphabet in the letter Shin or Seen. Why do we need Samek, which is going to be yet another form of the S? And then we also have the letter Tet. Well, Tet is pronounced Ta, like T, as is Tav. Sometimes Tav is pronounced Ta, sometimes Tha, Th. Now, in the Cepher, we use the words that begin with the Samek Dalet Mem. We use that and we express that using a C rather than an S, C as in cement, right? So there are times when the letter C is pronounced as an S, as in cement. And so this is why the Cepher is spelled with a C and not an S, because the word begins with a Samic. So the Samic here, the Samic Dalet Mem, may be inferential in the respect that when you look at the Aleph Dalet Mem, which is Adam or Edom, remember that Edom, Adam, and Adom are all spelled the same way, Aleph Dalet Mem, which means I will be blood. But in this case, we have the Samic Dalet Mem, which can infer a secularization of the blood. In other words, it's no longer holy with the Adam at the beginning, with the Aleph at the beginning. Rather, it has the secular Samic at the beginning, showing that it is a separated society. This is a corruption of blood. But the inference may also be that this Sodom is actually a corruption of Edom, a corruption of Edom. And so this is part of the reason why when the scriptures say that the Mashiach was crucified in Sodom and Egypt, because Sodom is the corruption of the blood of Edom, the corruption of the blood of Edom, Sodom. Okay? So this is what we see in this passage. All right. So in these two passages, we can see that we've kind of concluded really what has been this establishment of the genealogy. Not quite, because we're going to see that still Abram has still not in a situation where Sarah is going to have the child, even though Yah has said it's going to happen. And we're going to see that when we get into that passage, what kind of a blessing that truly is, and the miracle that occurs at that point with the rejuvenation both of Sarah and of Abraham. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes our discussion today, not only of Bere'shiyth chapter 18, but Bere'shiyth chapter 19. And we will pick it up again from here. Thank you.